Hello, once again, and welcome back to another episode of Reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. We're just gonna jump right in. We're just gonna read, and it's a casual read. This is not an audiobook. I'm gonna basically be reading and reacting to what we read. We'll be taking frequent breaks to make jokes, to talk about random tangents, and to Google words that I don't know, because this book was written in 1818. And I have the reading literacy, reading comprehension skills of a third grader. So, anyway, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. Let me go ahead and recap what happened last. Okay, as always, a reminder that Frankenstein is the name of the doctor and not the name of the monster. So when we talk about Frankenstein, I'll try to refer to him as Victor Frankenstein to avoid confusion. And the story, surprisingly, doesn't start out from the point of view of Victor Frankenstein. It starts out from the point of view of a explorer of the Arctic Circle, who is a captain of a crew on a ship who is on a voyage of discovery. They're trying to figure out why the compass points north. They're trying to figure out safe passages through the Arctic, through the North Pole. And while they're there, they see two very strange things. They see, in a super isolated region, two different people, two different dog sleds being pulled across the ice. The first one is pulling this enormous man, this giant, this big man pulling across the ice. And the second one shows up the day after the first one. And the second one, most of the dogs are dying or on the verge of death. The guy himself is on the verge of death, and that ends up being Victor Frankenstein. So he's in the North Pole chasing after this big monster. Okay, you can guess what the monster is that he's chasing, right? So they pull him onto the boat. He's kind of reluctant to get pulled onto the boat. He spends some time on the boat getting to know the captain and the other crew members. And then finally the captain gets him to tell his story of how he ended up in the Arctic. And that is where Chapter 1 starts. Chapter 1 begins when Victor Frankenstein actually takes over the narrative and starts telling his story to this captain of why he's in the Arctic chasing after this big monster. Last week's episode, we got into the beginning backstory of Victor Frankenstein. And the important, cliff notes is that Victor Frankenstein was born to a very wealthy family. His father was a wealthy politician in Geneva, Switzerland, I think. Was Switzerland or Sweden? Somewhere like that. It doesn't matter. His first cousin, named Elizabeth, ends up moving in with them. Victor Frankenstein's parents adopt young Elizabeth because her mother died. So Elizabeth ends up going to live with Victor Frankenstein's family, and they end up raising her as if they were, her own. And conveniently, the family decides, hey, wouldn't it be great if Victor Frankenstein and Elizabeth ended up married in the future? So they're sort of like betrothed. The mom really wants them to get married because she's like, oh, this is a match. So basically they've been matched. And it's kind of weird. I joked a lot about how it's like, him marrying his first cousin is like really gross. Like it gave me the ick. It was like a red flag kind of a thing. But that happened a lot back in the day. It's just different time, product of a different time. So Elizabeth and Victor Frankenstein are raised together. They're playmates. And he has a very good lifelong friend called, what was his name? Henry Clerval. Henry Clerval was his name. So he has a very good lifelong friend by the name of Henry Clerval. And they all sort of grow up together. It's a very, very super happy family. They all love each other. So Victor Frankenstein has two younger brothers as well. They're pretty far apart in age. The middle child is sick all the time, so he's like the sick little boy. The baby boy is just a little infant by the time Victor Frankenstein is like 17. He's like this tiny little baby. So then the complications start to arise. So Elizabeth comes down with scarlet fever. And that's pretty scary. But she starts recovering. Everything's fine. But before she's fully recovered all the way, the mom ends up going in to tend on her, because she's a wholesome mama. But she wasn't quite better yet. She was still contagious. So then the mom gets sick, and the scarlet fever ends up killing the mom, which is like super sad, super tragic. So the whole family gets shooken up by that really big tragic thing. The mom ends up dying, and Elizabeth really steps it up and steps into the role of kind of mothering the two younger boys and really stepping in to like kind of take care of the household and kind of fills the shoes of the mom. So that happens shortly before Victor Frankenstein is going to go travel to this college of Ingolstadt. He's going to go to this university to study science. So he was going to go to this college, but then his mom got sick and started dying, which delayed him going to college. And then a few months after they had some time to grieve, he finally said, okay, it's time for me to go. And he went to Ingolstadt. But before all that happened, very early on, he gets really wrapped up in all of these like occult writings, okay? Primarily around like alchemy. So like even for the time, they were outdated ideas around like science. That was sort of like magical thinking. If you know anything about alchemy, it's very magical. They wanted to make the Philosopher's Stone and the elixir of life. So basically they thought that by doing these chemical reactions, they could create substances that would make you live forever, like the Philosopher's Stone and the elixir of life. They thought that they could turn lead into gold by these magical chemical reactions. But as time goes on, he starts to realize that, you know, these ideas are kind of outdated and that modern science has kind of like made them obsolete. But because he was so wrapped up in this like mythological, magical thinking and like occult stuff, he finds modern science very boring. He kind of had these dreams of these big expectations in like alchemy to become this magical alchemist who could like cure, you know, all disease and end human suffering with like all of this alchemy. But it kind of popped that bubble. It kind of popped his expectations of like wanting to be able to do that. So he kind of doesn't know what he wants to study, but he goes off to study at this university anyway, and he goes to Ingolstadt. The first professor he meets tells him, or he asks him, what do you know? What do you know about, like, what have you studied about science? Like, what do you know? And he tells him, like, well, you know, I really only studied, like, Paracelsus, Agrippa, and Albertus Magnus, just some of the names that of the outdated philosophies that he'd studied. And the professor tears him a new one. He's, like, super, like, the professor's name is M. Kremp. And he just kind of insults him, and he tells him, like, wow, you wasted all your time studying this junk, all this nonsense? Like, why did you waste so much time studying these things? Like, are you stupid? Are you dumb? It really made Victor Frankenstein kind of feel bad about himself. He starts going to these lectures, and then when he's at these lectures, he meets this other professor, M. Waldman. Right. So there's M. Kremp, and then there's M. Waldman. So he goes to one of these lectures that is being given by M. Waldman, and it's super inspiring to him. The way that he talks about chemistry and the way that he talks about science, and they call it natural philosophy. The way that he talks about all this stuff just sort of like really inspires him. And he gives this speech where he talks about how although the people who came before us, the ideas that they had and the stuff that they hoped to achieve, with modern science, we can achieve more than they ever dreamed of achieving. Modern science can actually do even greater things. And it sort of inspires Frankenstein to be like, okay, like, all right, it gets him excited about chemistry. It gets him excited about science. And he's like, okay, he's like, maybe natural philosophy and science and chemistry was the magic I was looking for all along. So then he just starts excelling. M. Waldman kind of takes him under his wing, and Victor Frankenstein really quickly becomes the brightest pupil. He's sort of leaving all of his other, all of his peers in the dust. There's even many times where he figures out how to improve some of the lab equipment, because he comes up with these theories and these ideas of how we can improve the lab equipment that they're using and things like that. So he's quickly becoming this very promising scientist. Then he starts to get, he says that this one idea just starts to take over his mind. He wanted to answer the question of, like, where does life begin? What causes one thing to be alive and one thing to be dead? Like, he was hoping to discover, like, the secret of, like, life. He starts to kind of be obsessed with this idea, and he starts to, and you can kind of see where it's headed. He starts to get kind of crazy, kind of insane. And he starts spending a lot of time in graveyards, digging up dead bodies to examine how they're rotting and how they're decomposing. And then he would also go to the morgue a lot too, to examine freshly deceased corpses. And he really studies the human body, and he studies physiology, and he really gets a good grasp of how the human body works and all of the inner connections. And he gets so obsessed with this that he's not sleeping well. He's not taking care of himself. He's like super pale and sickly because he's not eating right. So he's really trying to figure out, like, where does life end and where does life begin? Like, what makes one thing alive and what makes one thing dead? And he says that eventually he figures it out. He figures out the secret to how to animate dead tissue. And he wants to create a creature of his own design that he wants to bring to life. So the whole backstory's been leading up. The whole story's been leading up to this point, right? And that's sort of where we left off. Was he was working super, super hard. He was gathering all of these body parts from grave sites and from slaughterhouses of like bits of like animal tissue and muscles and all these bones and different things to create this creature of his own design that he would bring to life. And he says, I'm going to be the father of an entirely new species of creature. He wants to create this new species that's never existed before. And he said that he wants it to look like a man. He decides to make a giant man, an 8-foot tall man, like an 8-foot tall creature that has the same shape of the same body proportions as a human man. And so he sets out to create it, and he says that he's working day in and day out and just obsessed with this idea that he wants to animate this new creature. And that's where that is where we left off. Is when he's working on it super hard, and he says that he's just about to get to his breakthrough, and he's just about to finally figure it out. But anyway, so that's sort of the recap. That's where we left off. Frankenstein has basically put this thing together. We left off right at the end of chapter 3, so we're going to jump into chapter 4 with a little bit of a cliffhanger last week. But before we jump in and start reading, as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing if you so choose to do. Really, really would help out my channel if you do. I would really appreciate it. And go ahead, like, please, I'm new to all this. I'm new to YouTube and all this stuff, so please let me know if there's any suggestions, any ways I can improve. Let me know in the comments. Sound off in the comments. If you have suggestions of books that you'd like me to read and review or cover. This isn't going to be an entirely book-centric channel. I got other stuff in the pipeline too. I stream on Twitch, so come join me on Twitch. Same name, Normac the Fowl. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you are entertained. So, kick up your feet, man. Relax. Put this on while you're doing dishes. Put this on while you're going on a walk or going on a run. Put this on during your commute to work, you know? Just chill out, listen to the story. It's going to be super chill. We're just going to keep it chill vibes. So just chill and listen. All right. So let's jump into chapter 4. Here we go. Chapter 4. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 a.m. The rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out, when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. Dude, that's so scary. So he's saying on a dreary night in November, he finally succeeded. He finally got this thing to come to life. It was already 1 a.m. The rain pattered dismally against the panes. So it's raining. The candle was nearly burnt out. Just imagine this like super, just like wax all over the floor. The glimmer of half-extinguished light. He saw the dull yellow eye of the creature finally open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. I'm like imagining like it's like super dark and like morbid, but I'm imagining like the sound of like a death rattle, if you know what that is, like the last dying breath of like a person, you know. I'm imagining like coming to life, like you know, like very raspy, like I don't know, I can't do this sound justice. We need to get like a really good voice actor for this series or something like that. It'd be really cool. By the way, you know, if you want to collaborate or something too, like let me know, because like I said, I mean, I'm new to all this. I'm just starting out. If you want to contribute or collaborate or maybe join me for a couple of read-throughs or something, like let me know. That'd be super, super fun. We could, you know, like stream it or something too. Anyway, so back to the scariness. Breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs, so it starts kind of shaking. It breathed hard and started moving. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe, or how delineate the wretch whom with such infinite pains and care I had endeavored to form? His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful! Great God! His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness, but these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes that seemed almost of the same color as the dun white sockets in which they were set. His shriveled complexion and straight black lips. Oh my gosh. So, what a description. What a description. You know, and this is why I said at the very beginning of the first episode that, like, there have been some odd adaptations of Frankenstein. Because, like, the earliest depictions of the monster in, like, the old black and white movies, they have him as this big lumbering, and which is accurate. He is this big 8-foot tall lumbering thing, but he's got the bolts in his neck, and he's got the, you know how Frankenstein looks with, like, the stitch across his, like, forehead and stuff, and he's, like, this big dumb, like, kind of guy, which isn't entirely inaccurate, but then somehow he gets he always gets depicted in color as this, like, green creature, like he's green with yellow eyes, which it said he had yellow eyes, but it says he has yellow skin. So why would he always be depicted as green? It's kind of an odd choice if you're gonna depict Frankenstein from the book, to give him like green skin. Anyway, it gives me chills. It makes me think of like the Uncanny Valley. You know what I mean? Like how, like, if you look at mannequins that or like wax sculptures are a good example. Things that look almost human but not quite human enough that your brain kind of freaks out and kind of gives you this like panic response when you see it. That's kind of what I'm picturing. Like obviously he's sprawled out on the ground as this big like 8-foot tall human who has the proportions of a human, right? It says you know that it was all proportionate. His limbs were in proportion, but the way that his teeth are just a little too white, and you can see the muscles and arteries through his like pale, thin yellow skin, and his hair is just a little too shiny and lustrous. Like it really is just this scary image, you know. That's why I really like the Junji Ito depiction in his manga. And it's not in color, unfortunately. I mean, maybe there's parts of it that are in color, like the front cover is in color, but I think Junji Ito really kind of captures this Uncanny Valley thing, and I'll put up some images of that up here. Anyway, we'll keep going. So shriveled complexion and straight black lips. So he's kind of wrinkly too, and black lips. Ugh, okay. The different accidents of life are not so changeable as the feelings of human nature. I had worked hard for nearly 2 years for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. For this I had deprived myself of rest and health. I had desired it with an ardor that far exceeded moderation. But now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Unable to endure the aspect of the being I had created, I rushed out of the room and continued a long time traversing my bedchamber, unable to compose my mind to sleep. At length, lassitude succeeded to the tumult I had before endured, and I threw myself on the bed in my clothes, endeavoring to seek a few moments of forgetfulness. But it was in vain. I slept indeed, but I was disturbed by the wildest dreams. I thought I saw Elizabeth, in the bloom of health, walking in the streets of Ingolstadt. Delighted and surprised, I embraced her, but as I imprinted the first kiss on her lips, they became livid with the hue of death. Her features appeared to change, and I thought that I held the corpse of my dead mother in my arms. A shroud enveloped her form, and I saw the grave worms crawling in the folds of the flannel. I started from my sleep with horror. A cold dew covered my forehead. My teeth chattered, and every limb became convulsed, when, by the dim and yellow light of the moon, as it forced its way through the window shutters, I beheld the wretch, the miserable monster whom I had created. He held up the curtain of the bed, and his eyes, if eyes they may be called, were fixed on me. His jaws opened, and he muttered some inarticulate sounds, while a grin wrinkled his cheeks. He might have spoken, but I did not hear. One hand was stretched out, seemingly to detain me, but I escaped and rushed downstairs. I took refuge in the courtyard belonging to the house which I inhabited, where I remained during the rest of the night, walking up and down in the greatest agitation, listening attentively, catching and fearing each sound as if it were to announce the approach of the demoniacal corpse to which I had so miserably given life. Oh my gosh. Dude. This is so chilling, man. This is crazy because so he says, like, as soon as like he was so caught up in bringing this thing to life on this mission that he'd set out for himself. He was so caught up with the idea and the thrill of it, like I want to create this new creature and bring this new thing into life, into existence. But the minute that he succeeds, all of the dreams and all of the beauty and all of the excitement about it disappear because he achieved his goal, right? He hit his goal. And then what's replaced is this feeling of fear and dread. And I don't blame him. Like, he's, staring down at this thing that just woke up on the middle of his floor, this 8-foot tall dead thing that he's looking at, that's got this horrible complexion and just this nasty, probably stinks really bad. And all of a sudden it comes crashing down on him and he realizes, what have I done? And he kind of like freaks out. And so so he runs away because he's so afraid of it, and he locks him. Well, he doesn't lock himself, but he goes into his bedroom, and like he's spending time pacing, trying to figure out what he's gonna do. But then he lays down, and sleep kind of just overtakes him because he's so exhausted. He finally just passes out in his bed. But when he wakes up, the monster that he just made, the creature that he just brought life into existence, is like standing over him, and he says that he like reaches and parts the curtain of his bed and like reaches towards him and like starts smiling and makes these like inarticulate sounds. Like, once again, I wish I was like a voice actor or something who could do that justice, like if he's reaching out like like mumbling, like his tongue's probably really big and fat, like like I don't know what that would sound like. I can't do it justice to make it scary. I would just sound silly doing it, but but how terrifying is that? So it's this thing, it's like it just exists now, and so it freaks him out. It's reaching towards him, but it freaks out, and he gets away, and he runs off, and he goes to this house. I took refuge in the courtyard belonging to the house. Oh, in the courtyard. Okay, belonging to the house. So he runs out, and he's hanging out in the courtyard, where I remained during the rest of the night, walking up and down in the greatest agitation, listening attentively, catching and fearing each sound as if it were to announce the approach of the demoniacal corpse to which I had so miserable. So he runs out of the house. He's like, I don't know what to do. I just created this giant 8-foot tall thing, and it was coming at me, and it was smiling at me. So he's outside, like listening, like hyper fixated on any sound. Like, is it following me? Is it coming out? Like, is it chasing me? Like, and he's just walking back and forth. Like, what do I do? Oh, no mortal could support the horror of that countenance. A mummy, again, endued with animation, could not be so hideous as that wretch. I had gazed on him while unfinished. He was ugly then, but when those muscles and joints were rendered capable of motion, it became a thing such as even Dante could not have conceived. So that's a reference to the Divine Comedy, Dante's Inferno. So, and that might be something we could read at some point on this channel. That could be fun to kind of read through that. Dante's Inferno is wild. You know, he goes through like the 7 layers of hell, or however many layers there are. I don't know. And there's a ton of scary, like horrific imagery in Dante's Inferno. So he's saying like, while I was working on this thing, he was ugly and gross, but as soon as he started moving, it became a thing such as even Dante could not have conceived. That's really cool. I passed the night wretchedly. Sometimes my pulse beat so quickly and hardly that I felt the palpitation of every artery. At others, I nearly sank to the ground through languor and extreme weakness. Mingled with this horror, I felt the bitterness of disappointment. Dreams that had been my food and pleasant rest for so long a space were now become a hell to me, and the change was so rapid, the overthrow so complete. Yeah, I mean, he was so obsessed with this idea, but now he's terrified of what he's created. He was so obsessed with this idea of creating this thing, bringing life to this new creature, but now that he sees it, he's terrified. Just the high and low, that roller coaster of emotion, man. Morning, dismal and wet, at length dawned, and discovered... let me try that again. Morning, dismal and wet, at length dawned, and discovered to my sleepless and aching eyes the church of Ingolstadt, its white steeple and clock, which indicated the 6th hour. So 6 a.m., morning, dawn is coming. The porter opened the gates of the court, which had that night been my asylum, and I issued into the streets, pacing them with quick steps, as if I sought to avoid the wretch, whom I feared every turning of the street would present to my view. I did not dare return to the apartment which I inhabited, but felt impelled to hurry on, although wetted by the rain which poured from a black and comfortless sky. So he's like, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with this thing, man. Like, he just kind of just like nopes out. like I hope he locked the door behind him or something, you know, like what's gonna happen? What's the creature gonna do? What's the monster gonna do that you just made? Like, I guess he's kind of assuming it's just gonna wander off, because he says that as he's walking through the streets, he's afraid every corner that he turns down, the monster's gonna be there waiting for him. So I guess he suspects that it's gonna get out anyway. Dude, that's so reckless, man. It's this giant 8-foot tall thing. You're just gonna like let that loose? You're just gonna like that's crazy. What is it even thinking? Like, what is its mental capacity? I have so many questions. Like, does it have memories of its like past lives, of all the bodies that were combined with it, like its brain? Does it have any memories at all, or is it like a baby? Does it not know anything? Oh my gosh. Dude, this is... Okay, I gotta know what happens. So, turning the street... Okay, I continued walking in this manner for some time, endeavoring by bodily exercise to ease the load that weighed upon my mind. I traversed the streets without any clear conception of where I was or what I was doing. My heart palpitated in the sickness of fear, and I hurried on with irregular steps, not daring to look about me. So he's just kind of panic walking. Oh wait. Okay, there's like a little poem here or something. Like one who on a lonely road doth walk in fear and dread, and having once turned round walks on, and turns no more his head, because he knows a frightful fiend doth close behind him tread. Doth close behind him tread. Man, that poem will give you anxiety. Let me read that again. Like one who on a lonely road doth walk in fear and dread, and having once turned round, walks on and turns no more his head, because he knows a frightful fiend doth close behind him tread. That's scary, man. So you're walking down the street, you're walking down the road, and you turn around once and you see some scary thing following you, and then you don't want to turn around again because you don't want to look at it. You don't want to look at the scary thing that's chasing you. Dude, so he's freaking out. He's convinced that this thing is like stalking him, that it's like after him. Imagine that, dude. You just created this 8-foot tall creature, like 8 feet tall. I showed in the last episode. I'll put up some of those graphics that compare 8 foot tall to like 6 foot tall, 5'10" person, average height person. Imagine that thing is like stalking you, like he's terrified. This thing's like chasing him, like following him. Continuing thus, I came at length opposite to the inn at which the various diligences and carriages usually stopped. Here I paused, I knew not why, but I remained some minutes with my eyes fixed on a coach that was coming towards me from the other end of the street. As it drew nearer, I observed that it was the Swiss diligence. Oh, from where he's from? Yes, because he's from Geneva, Switzerland, so he recognizes that it's a Swiss one. It stopped just where I was standing, and on the door being opened, I perceived Henry Clerval, his best friend, who, on seeing me, instantly sprung out. "My dear Frankenstein," exclaimed he, "how glad I am to see you! How fortunate that you should be here at the very moment of my alighting! What are the chances?" he's running from this monster, and then who shows up but his freaking childhood best friend? Like right at that moment? What? Nothing could equal my delight on seeing Clerval. Yeah, right? I mean, like, yeah, like, what the hell, man? He's just there. His presence brought back to my thoughts my father, Elizabeth, and all those scenes of home so dear to my recollection. I grasped his hand, and in a moment forgot my horror and misfortune. I felt suddenly, and for the first time during many months, calm and serene joy. I welcomed my friend, therefore, in the most cordial manner, and we walked towards my college. Clerval continued talking for some time about our mutual friends, and his own good fortune in being permitted to come to Ingolstadt. "You may easily believe," said he, "how great was the difficulty to persuade my father that it was not absolutely necessary for a merchant not to understand anything except bookkeeping. And indeed, I believe I left him incredulous to the last, for his constant answer to my unwearied entreaties was the same as that of the Dutch schoolmaster in The Vicar of Wakefield. I have 10,000 florins a year without Greek. I eat heartily without Greek." But his affection for me at length overcame his dislike of learning, and he has permitted me to undertake a voyage of discovery to the land of knowledge. So, one of the things I didn't cover in the recap earlier is that Henry Clerval didn't go to the same school because his father didn't want him to get an education, because his father was already a wealthy merchant. Henry Clerval's father is a wealthy merchant and wants Henry Clerval to take over the family business. So his dad's like, "You don't need an education. Like, all you need to, I can show you the ropes. I can teach you the business. You don't need to go to school. Like, the sooner you take over the business, the sooner I can retire," is probably what his dad's saying. So he's like, "You don't need no education. Like, you're just another brick on the wall." No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, Pink Floyd. Anyway, so it sounds like he convinced his dad, Henry Clerval convinced his dad to let him come out to this college with Frankenstein, with his childhood best friend. So he's here now, and he says, I've convinced my dad to do it. So he says, continuing on, Henry Clerval says, "It gives me the greatest delight to see you." Oh, no. This is Frankenstein replying to Henry Clerval. He's telling Henry Clerval, "It gives me the greatest delight to see you, but tell me how you left my father, brothers, and Elizabeth." "Very well, and very happy, only a little uneasy that they hear from you so seldom. By the by, I mean to lecture you a little upon their account myself. But, my dear Frankenstein," continued he, stopping short, gazing full in my face, "I did not before remark how very ill you appear. So thin and pale, you look as if you had been watching for several nights." So So he says, he's like, dude, man, like, Frankenstein's like, dude, it's so good to see you here. Like, I'm so glad you can join me at college. And then Henry's like, he's like, tell me about my family. Tell me how my dad's doing. Tell me how Elizabeth is doing. He's like, yeah, I'll tell you. Henry's like, I'll tell you how they're all doing. But dude, why do you look so pale? Why are you so sick, man? It looks like you haven't slept in like several days. Just kind of paraphrasing that. And Frankenstein replies, you have guessed right. I have lately been so deeply engaged in one occupation that I have not allowed myself sufficient rest. As you see, but I sincerely hope that all these employments are now at an end and that I am at length free. I trembled excessively. I could not endure to think of, and far less to allude to the occurrences of the preceding night. Yeah, like just because Henry's here doesn't make any of that go away. I walked with a quick pace, and we soon arrived at my college. I then reflected, and the thought made me shiver, that the creature whom I had left in my apartment might still be there, alive and walking about. I mean, that's best case scenario, bro. Like, that's literally best case scenario, the monster's still there. Then you know where it's at. If it wandered off, then you have no idea where it went. You don't know what it's getting up to. Dude, this is crazy. This is actually crazy. So he's afraid that it's still going to be there in his apartment walking about. I guess because he doesn't want Henry Clerval to see it and to be freaked out. He doesn't want to have to explain what he's been doing, so he's hoping that it's not there, that it just kind of goes away. Dude, I don't know. This is... I guess if I was in this situation, I wouldn't know what the hell to do either. Like... Anyway, I dreaded to behold this monster, but I feared still more that Henry should see him. Entreating him, therefore, to remain a few minutes at the bottom of the stairs, I darted up towards my own room. My hand was already on the lock of the door before I recollected myself. I then paused, and a cold shivering came over me. I threw the door forcibly open, as children are accustomed to do when they expect a specter to stand in waiting for them on the other side. But nothing appeared. I stepped fearfully in. The apartment was empty, and my bedroom was also freed from its hideous guest. I could hardly believe that so great a good fortune could have befallen me. That is not a good thing. Like, it's gone. You don't know where it's at now. How could he say that's good fortune? But when I became assured that my enemy had indeed fled, I clapped my hands for joy and ran down to Clerval. You should not be happy about this. Dude, you need to come clean to your friend. He'll understand, and he'll help you. He'll help you dispose of it, or do something. Like, this is not okay. Okay, this is insanity. We ascended into my room, and the servant presently brought breakfast. Oh, they got a servant. Oh, he's bougie. And the servant presently brought breakfast, but I was unable to contain myself. It was not joy only that possessed me. I felt my flesh tingle with excess of sensitiveness, and my pulse beat rapidly. I was unable to remain for a single instant in the same place. I jumped over the chairs, clapped my hands, and laughed aloud. Clerval at first attributed my unusual spirits to joy on his arrival, but when he observed me more attentively, he saw a wildness in my eyes for which he could not account, and my loud, unrestrained, heartless laughter frightened and astonished him. Okay, so he's full-on mad scientist vibes right now. Like, full-on, I'm picturing the disheveled hair. He says he's this loud, heartless laughter. And he's freaking out Henry Clerval. At first Henry's like, oh yeah, you're excited to see me. And he's like, bro, like, are you good? Are you good? Meanwhile, Frankenstein's like, oh, it's good to see you. Let's have breakfast. And he's jumping over the chairs. Remember to hydrate, by the way. Okay. My dear Victor, cried he, what for God's sake is the matter? Do not laugh in that manner. How ill you are! What is the cause of all this? Do not ask me, cried I, putting my hands before my eyes, for I thought I saw the dreaded spectre glide into the room. He can tell. Oh, save me, save me! I imagined that the monster seized me. I struggled furiously and fell down in a fit. So he's hallucinating that the monster is attacking him right now. Poor Clerval. What must have been his feelings? A meeting which he anticipated with such joy so strangely turned to bitterness. But I was not the witness of his grief, for I was lifeless and did not recover my senses for a long, long time. So he passed out, he fainted, because he thought that the monster was breaking back in and attacking him. This was the commencement of a nervous fever, which confined me for several months. Oh my gosh. So he's just in this nervous fit, a fugue state. I don't know. Got to quote Breaking Bad. Confined me for several months. During all that time, Henry was my only nurse. Oh, dude, Henry's such a bro. Henry is such a homie. I afterwards learned that, knowing my father's advanced age and unfitness for so long a journey, and how wretched my sickness would make Elizabeth, he spared them this grief by concealing the extent of my disorder. He knew that I could not have a more kind and attentive nurse than himself, and, firm in the hope he felt of my recovery, he did not doubt that, instead of doing harm, he performed the kindest action that he could towards them. So we're jumping forward months. This is a time jump going forward for months. Henry Clerval is taking, right? Did it say months? Yeah, several months. A nervous fever which confined me for several months. During all that time, Henry was my only nurse. So for months, Henry's just taking care of Frankenstein. And he's in this, he's out of it, man. He's in this nervous fever. Months go by. And, I mean, it doesn't make any mention of the monster showing up or the creature showing up at all. So, okay, we'll keep reading. He knew that I could not have a more kind and attentive nurse. Yada, yada, yada. Instead of doing harm, he performed the kindest action that he could towards him. Okay. But I was in reality very ill, and surely nothing but the unbounded and unremitting attentions of my friend could have restored me to life. The form of the monster on whom I had bestowed existence was forever before my eyes, and I raved incessantly concerning him. Doubtless my words surprised Henry. He at first believed them to be the wanderings of my disturbed imagination. But the pertinacity with which I continually recurred to the same subject persuaded him that my disorder indeed owed its origin to some uncommon and terrible event. So he got PTSD. He's just straight up freaking out PTSD. And he keeps seeing the monster. He keeps seeing the image of the monster in his mind's eye, and it's making him go crazy because he saw this thing, and he's like freaking out. And it sounds like Henry's starting to get questions too. He's starting to wonder, he keeps talking about this thing, this monster, this creature. I wonder if something happened that made him this way. He saw some kind of specter, some kind of ghost or something. So he's wondering. By very slow degrees and with frequent relapses that alarmed and grieved my friend, I recovered. I remember the first time I became capable of observing outward objects with any kind of pleasure. I perceived that the fallen leaves had disappeared, and that the young buds were shooting forth from the trees that shaded my window. It was a divine spring, and the season contributed greatly to my convalescence. I felt also sentiments of joy and affection revive in my bosom. My gloom disappeared, and in a short time I became as cheerful as before I was attacked by the fatal passion. So, all the way through to spring, it sounds like, when the fallen leaves are gone and the young buds are shooting forth from the trees that shaded my window, he's finally starting to feel better, but he's having relapses, it says. But he's finally starting to feel better. "Dearest Clerval," exclaimed I, "how kind, how very good you are to me. This whole winter, instead of being spent in study, as you promised yourself, has been consumed in my sick room. How shall I ever repay you? I feel the greatest remorse for the disappointment of which I have been the occasion, but you will forgive me." Clerval replies, "You will repay me entirely if you do not discompose? You will repay me entirely if you do not discompose yourself, but get well as fast as you can. And since you appear in such good spirits, I may speak to you on one subject, may I not?" I trembled. One subject? What could it be? Could he allude to an object on whom I dared not even think? So he knows. Henry Clerval's got questions. "Compose yourself," said Clerval, who observed my change of color. "I will not mention it if it agitates you, but your father and cousin would be very happy if they received a letter from you in your own handwriting. They hardly know how ill you have been, and are uneasy at your long silence. Is that all, my dear Henry? How could you suppose that my first thought would not fly towards those dear, dear friends whom I love, and who are so deserving of my love? If this is your present temper, my friend, you will perhaps be glad to see a letter that has been lying here some days for you. It is from your cousin, I believe. Okay. So, and that it looks like that's the end of chapter 4. So, dang, man. So, we get the introduction to the monster, but it immediately just disappears. It's gone without a trace because Frankenstein nopes out, and it's sort of and he runs into his childhood best friend, Henry Clerval, and he takes him back to his apartment, and he starts freaking out. He's got like PTSD. He's got like a nervous fever for months. Winter turns into spring before he starts to feel better. And all Henry asks is just that he writes his family back. He says, write your family. Let them know you're okay. And Henry's such a bro. Henry's such a homie. He takes care of him the whole time. He's his nurse the whole time. He makes sure that he's doing good. And all he says is, hey, you know, just write your family back, bro. Like, you need to write your family back. So, wow, that's crazy. Okay. So he says, okay, I'll do that. And he says, you have a letter from your cousin. So you have a letter from Elizabeth, right? Again, his love interest and future wife is his first cousin. That's just the way they did it back then. So just get over it. Grow up. Okay. Anyway. Chapter 5. Clerval then put the following letter into my hands. To Victor Frankenstein, my dear cousin, I cannot describe to you the uneasiness we have all felt concerning your health. We cannot help imagining that your friend Clerval conceals the extent of your disorder, for it is now several months since we have seen your handwriting, and all this time you have been obliged to dictate your letters to Henry. Oh, so Henry's been covering for him, writing letters, like, for him, like, dictating, you know, trying to make sure the family isn't worried. They don't know the extent of his disorder, because he doesn't want him to worry. Surely, Victor, you must have been exceedingly ill, and this makes us all very wretched, as much so nearly as after the death of your dear mother. My uncle was almost persuaded that you were indeed dangerously ill, and could hardly be restrained from undertaking a journey to Ingolstadt. Clerval always writes that you are getting better. I eagerly hope that you will confirm this intelligence soon in your own handwriting, for indeed, Victor, we are all very miserable on this account. Relieve us from this fear, and we shall be the happiest creatures in the world. Your father's health is now so vigorous that he appears 10 years younger since last winter. Ernest also is so much improved that you would hardly know him. He is now nearly 16 and has lost that sickly appearance which he had some years ago. He has grown quite robust and active. So Ernest is the younger brother, not the youngest brother, but the middle child, the middle brother. He's the one who was just sick throughout his whole childhood, just a very sick, impaired boy. Continuing on, my uncle and I conversed a long time last night about what profession Ernest should follow. His constant illness, when young, has deprived him of the habits of application, and now that he enjoys good health, he is continually in the open air, climbing the hills or rowing on the lake. I therefore propose that he should be a farmer, which you know, cousin, is a favorite scheme of mine. A farmer's is a very healthy, happy life, and the least hurtful, or rather the most beneficial profession of any. My uncle had an idea of his being educated as an advocate, that through his interest he might become a judge. But besides that, he is not at all fitted for such an occupation. It is certainly more credible to cultivate the earth for the sustenance of man than to be the confidant and sometimes the accomplice of his vices, which is the profession of a lawyer. I said that the employments of a prosperous farmer, if they were not a more honorable, they were at least a happier species of occupation than that of a judge, whose misfortune it was always to meddle with the dark side of human nature. My uncle smiled and said that I ought to be an advocate myself, which put an end to the conversation on that subject. I like the way Elizabeth writes letters. She's just so wholesome, man. Dude, Elizabeth is a great character. So she's saying, all right, Ernest, your younger brother is healthy now. He's healthy, but because he was so sick for so long, he's lost out on a lot of learning and a lot of experience, you know. So we're trying to figure out what he's going to do because he hasn't gotten any schooling, any education. So she wants him to be a farmer. And she thinks very highly of the farmers. It ain't much, but it's honest work. That's kind of her vibes. And then the dad is like, nah, I want him to do what I do. I want one of the boys in the family to grow up to be a political figure. I want him to be a judge. I want him to be a lawyer. And she's like, no, lawyers are slimy serpent scumbags. And he's like, well, you make a good point there. You should have been a lawyer yourself. Total dad energy, dad vibes. For her to be like, no, I don't want him to be a judge because he has to deal with all this dark stuff and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, you make a really good argument there. He's like, you'd make a good lawyer yourself. Total dad vibes. Anyway, carrying on. And now I must tell you a little story that will please and perhaps amuse you. Do you not remember Justine Moritz? Probably you do not. I will relate her story, therefore, in a few words. Madame Moritz, her mother, was a widow with 4 children, of whom Justine was the third. This girl had always been the favorite of her father, but through a strange perversity, her mother could not endure her, and after the death of M. Moritz, treated her very ill. My aunt observed this, and when Justine was 12 years of age, prevailed on her mother to allow her to live at her house. So, her aunt, Frankenstein's mom, steps in and says, hey, let us raise this kid. You don't seem to like this kid, Justine. For whatever reason, you hate her. Let us raise her. The Republican institutions of our country have produced simpler and happier manners than those which prevail in the great monarchies that surround it. Hence there is less distinction between the several classes of its inhabitants, and the lower orders being neither so poor nor so despised, their manners are more refined and moral. A servant in Geneva does not mean the same thing as a servant in France and England. Justine, thus received in our family, learned the duties of a servant, a condition which, in our fortunate country, does not include the idea of ignorance and a sacrifice of the dignity of a human being. So she's saying, we're just a better class of people all around. So if she comes over, she's better off being a servant where we live, where in our country, than she is, being anything anywhere. After what I have said, I dare say you well remember the heroine of my little tale, for Justine was a great favorite of yours, and I recollect you once remarked that if you were in an ill humor, one glance from Justine could dissipate it, for the same reason that Ariosto gives concerning the beauty of Angelica. She looked so frank-hearted and happy. My aunt conceived a great attachment for her, by which she was induced to give her an education superior to that which she had at first intended. This benefit was fully repaid. Justine was the most grateful little creature in the world. I do not mean that she made any professions. I never heard one pass her lips. But you could see by her eyes that she almost adored her protectress. Although her disposition was gay and in many respects inconsiderate, yet she paid the greatest attention to every gesture of my aunt. She thought her the model of all excellence and endeavored to imitate her phraseology and manners, so that even now she often reminds me of her. Okay, so Frankenstein's mom, Elizabeth's aunt, decides, I'm going to take this little girl under my wing. I'm going to make sure she has a good education. I'm going to treat her really nice. I'm going to do all of this stuff for her. And Justine just freaking soaks up the attention. She just wants to be exactly like Madame Frankenstein is. The mom who's taking care of her so well. And so much so that she became like her to the extent that Elizabeth is reminded of her aunt whenever she sees Justine. When my dearest aunt died, everyone was too much occupied in their own grief to notice poor Justine, who had attended her during her illness with the most anxious affection. Poor Justine was very ill, but other trials were reserved for her. One by one, her brothers and sister died, and her mother, with the exception of her neglected daughter, was left childless. The conscience of the woman was troubled. She began to think that the deaths of her favorites was a judgment from heaven to chastise her partiality. She was a Roman Catholic, and I believe her confessor confirmed the idea which she had conceived. Accordingly, a few months after you departed for Ingolstadt, Justine was called home by her repentant mother. Poor girl. She wept when she quitted our house. She was much altered since the death of my aunt. Grief had given softness and a winning mildness to her manners, which had before been remarkable for vivacity. Nor was her residence at her mother's house of a nature to restore her gaiety. The poor woman was very vacillating in her repentance. She sometimes begged Justine to forgive her unkindness, but much oftener accused her of having caused the deaths of her brothers and sister. Perpetual fretting at length threw Madame Moritz into a decline, which at first increased her irritability, but she is now at peace forever. She died on the first approach of cold weather, at the beginning of this last winter. Justine has returned to us, and I assure you I love her tenderly. She is very clever and gentle, and extremely pretty. As I mentioned before, her mien and her expressions continually remind me of my dear aunt. So the mom who hated her, who rejected her when she was a little girl, all of her other children die. And she reaches out to Justine and she says, "Come back because you're the only surviving child I have." And Justine's like, "I don't really want to go, but I kind of have to because it's my biological mom." So she goes, and it sounds like she's kind of going back and forth. Like she's like an abusive, like presence, like kind of toxic mom. Sometimes she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you forgive me and you don't hate me to my grave." And then some days she's like, "You're the reason the other children died. It's all your fault." So really toxic, really kind of abusive, traumatic thing to go through. But Justine's biological mom ends up dying, and then she moves back. And she's where she belongs again, which is good, okay. I must also say a few words to you, my dear cousin, of little darling William. I wish you could see him. He is very tall. Okay, hold on. So all of that story with Justine, it may or may not be relevant to the bigger story. I'm expecting that we will meet Justine later in the story and she'll have some part to play in the story. But maybe not. Who knows? Maybe all of that was completely irrelevant and it was just random filler. Who knows? Maybe it was one of those filler episodes in Naruto where you're just like, okay, I don't really care about, about any of that. Anyway, so let's learn about William. What does she got to say about William? William, if you remember, was the little baby boy, the baby of the family, the youngest sibling, youngest brother. I must also say a few words to you, my dear cousin, of little darling William. I wish you could see him. He is very tall of his age, with sweet, laughing blue eyes, dark eyelashes, and curling hair. When he smiles, 2 little dimples appear on each cheek, which are rosy with health. Oh, just a cute little baby boy. Want to bounce him on your knee. He has already had 1 or 2 little wives, but Louisa Byron is his favorite, a pretty little girl of 5 years of age. So he's just this little baby boy. Anyway. Now, dear Victor, I dare say you wish to be indulged in a little gossip concerning the good people of Geneva. The pretty Miss Mansfield has already received the congratulatory visits on her approaching marriage with a young Englishman, John Melbourne, Esquire. Her ugly sister... Oh, dude, Elizabeth, throwing shade. Jeez. Her ugly sister, Manon. Well, with a name like Manon? Hey, I'm the ugly sister, Manon. I like to wrestle in the mud with the pigs. Her ugly sister, Manon, married M. de Villard, I don't know, the rich banker last autumn. Well, hey, man, you know, she might be the ugly sister, but she scored herself a rich banker man. So, who's laughing now? Who gets the last laugh, right? Looks aren't everything, okay? Anyway. Your favorite schoolfellow, Louis Manoir, has suffered several misfortunes since the departure of Clerval from Geneva, but he has already recovered his spirits and is reported to be on the point of marrying a very lively, pretty French woman, Madame Tavernier. She is a widow and much older than Manoir, but she is very much admired and a favorite with everybody. So, she's already been married once, and she's a widow. She's older than him, but hey, you know, I mean, love finds a way, right? I ain't judging. You know, it's like it says in that song by the Outfield. You know, just is on a vacation far away. Come around, we'll talk it over. So many things that I want to say. You know, I like my girls a little bit older, right? If he likes his girls a little bit older, then Manoir is allowed to do the same. All right. Anyway, I have written myself into good spirits, dear cousin. Yet I cannot conclude without again anxiously inquiring concerning your health. Dear Victor, if you are not very ill, write yourself and make your father and all of us happy. Or, I cannot bear to think of the other side of the question. My tears already flow. Adieu, my dearest cousin, Elizabeth Lavenza. Dude, Elizabeth's so freaking solid. Dude, she's freaking... I love all the characters in this story, man. Like, all the characters are good. I mean, I guess I'm not a huge fan of Victor Frankenstein because he's kind of an idiot. Like, who creates this giant 8-foot-tall creature and then just is like, oh, it's gone. I don't know where it went. But everybody else is great. Henry's a homie. Elizabeth is a homie. They're all homies, dude. Remember to hydrate. Okay. Dear Elizabeth, I exclaimed when I had read her letter. I will write instantly and relieve them from the anxiety they must feel. I wrote, and this exertion greatly fatigued me, but my convalescence had commenced and proceeded regularly. In another fortnight, I was able to leave my bedchambers. Wow. Okay, so he's feeling better. He feels like he has to write her back instantly because he's like, oh man, they're so worried about me. She says she's crying. She's so worried about me. So he writes him back, and it really takes it out of him. It really fatigues him. But he's already recovered, so it's fine. So he's all right. One of my first duties on my recovery was to introduce Clerval to the several professors of the university. In doing this, I underwent a kind of rough usage, ill befitting the wounds that my mind had sustained. Ever since the fatal night, the end of my labors, and the beginning of my misfortunes, I had conceived a violent antipathy even to the name of natural philosophy. Oh, so he hates science now. He freaking hates science, because he's like, look at what it did to me. When I was otherwise quite restored to health, the sight of a chemical instrument would renew all the agony of my nervous symptoms. So not even just that he hates it, but just that he's like it's triggering him, like he's got PTSD. And when he sees chemical instruments and all of these scientific lab equipment, it triggers that and makes him panic. Ooh, okay. Henry saw this and had removed all my apparatus from my view. He had also changed my apartment, for he perceived that I had acquired a dislike for the room which had previously been my laboratory. But these cares of Clerval were made of no avail when I visited the professors. M. Waldman inflicted torture when he praised with kindness and warmth the astonishing progress I had made in the sciences. He soon perceived that I disliked the subject, but, not guessing the real cause, he attributed my feelings to modesty, and changed the subject from my improvement to the science itself, with a desire, as I evidently saw, of drawing me out. What could I do? He meant to please, and he tormented me. I felt as if he had placed carefully one by one in my view those instruments which were to be afterwards used in putting me to a slow and cruel death. I writhed under his words, yet dared not exhibit the pain I felt. Clerval, whose eyes and feelings were always quick in discerning the sensations of others, declined the subject, alleging in excuse his total ignorance, and the conversation took a more general turn. I thanked my friend from my heart, but I did not speak. I saw plainly that he was surprised, but he never attempted to draw my secret from me. And although I loved him with a mixture of affection and reverence that knew no bounds, yet I could never persuade myself to confide to him that event which was so often present to my recollection, but which I feared the detail to another would only impress more deeply. Okay, so so when he's meeting with the professors, he's meeting with his mentor, M. Waldman, and he's introducing his friend to all of these professors, and he introduces him to M. Waldman. And M. Waldman is just singing his praises, because remember, Frankenstein's a hotshot. Victor Frankenstein is like a prodigy. He is a genius. So M. Waldman is saying, oh, well, we love Frankenstein. He's this amazing, he's a genius, and he's singing his praises. But it's kind of triggering for Frankenstein because he's gone through this traumatic thing, and he's really regretting the experiment that he did where he created this monster. So M. Waldman can tell that something's up, and he's like, how come you're feeling so, like, I can tell something's off, and he's trying to figure it out, and he's sort of like dodging the question, is what it sounds like to me. And then his friend Henry Clerval declined the subject. Sounds like Henry kind of steps in for him to change the subject as an excuse for his total ignorance. So basically, I guess Henry Clerval's saying, I don't know what you guys are talking about, all this sciencey stuff. I'm not that smart. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's change the subject. So Henry kind of covers for him. Again, what a homie. What an absolute bro. Total bro code. So, okay. But he's saying right here at the end of the paragraph, though, it's important to note that he's saying, I couldn't tell Clerval what was going on. I couldn't tell him about the experience of me creating this monster, this creature that scared me to death. Because he's afraid that if someone else knows about it, it's going to scare them even worse than him. They're going to be worse off than he is. So he's keeping it to himself. I don't think that's very smart or very wise. But you could see why. At least he has an explanation of why he's doing that. Okay. M. Kremp was not equally docile. So Kremp was the guy who tore him a new one when he found out that he had been studying Albertus Magnus and Paracelsus and Agrippa, all of these occult writers of like ancient like alchemy, like arts and things like that. He's the guy who's kind of been a douche the whole time. I said he was kind of like Severus Snape and like Harry Potter, where he's just always finding a way to like, poke at him. So M. Kremp was not equally docile, and in my condition at that time of almost insupportable sensitiveness, his harsh, blunt encomiums gave me even more pain than the benevolent approbation of M. Waldman. Damn the fellow, cried he. Why, M. Clerval, I assure you he has outstripped us all. Wait, what does he say? He said, okay, oh, this is M. Kremp talking. Okay, approbation of M. Waldman. Damn the fellow, cried he. Why, M. Clerval, I assure you he has outstripped us all. I stare if you please, but it is nevertheless true. A youngster who, but a few years ago, believed Cornelius Agrippa as firmly as the gospel, has now set himself at the head of the university, and if he is not soon pulled down, we shall all be out of countenance. Aye, aye, continued he, observing my face expressive of suffering. M. Frankenstein. Okay, everybody's M. Is that like Mr.? Am I supposed to be saying Mr. there? And I've just been saying M the entire time? I thought that... I didn't realize that. So, okay, I guess because he's calling him M. Clerval, Mr. Clerval. Mr. I'm going to start replacing that with Mr. That makes way more sense. Okay, anyway. So he's saying, oh yeah, Frankenstein's bad news. He's trying to tell Clerval Frankenstein's bad news because he's rose to the top. He's in the spotlight. Everybody's looking at him, but he's gonna pull us all down with him. And then he says, Mr. Frankenstein is modest, an excellent quality in a young man. Young men should be diffident of themselves. You know, Mr. Clerval, I was myself when young, but that wears out in a very short time. Mr. Kremp had now commenced a eulogy on himself, which happily turned the conversation from a subject that was so annoying to me. So he starts feeling sorry for himself, and he starts going on and on about his life, and he's narcissistic. You know, we already know that Mr. Kremp is narcissistic. Anyway, Clerval was no natural philosopher. His imagination was too vivid for the minutiae of science. Languages were his principal study, and he sought by acquiring their elements to open a field for self-instruction on his return to Geneva. Persian, Arabic, and Hebrew gained his attention after he had made himself perfectly master of Greek and Latin. For my own part, idleness had never been irksome to me, and now that I wished to fly from my recollection and hatred my former studies, I felt great relief in being the fellow pupil with my friend, and found not only instruction but consolation in the works of the Orientalists. Their melancholy is soothing, and their joy elevating to a degree I never experienced in studying the authors of any other country. When you read their writings, life appears to consist in a warm sun and garden of roses, in the smiles and frowns of a fair enemy, and the fire that consumes your own heart. How different from the manly and heroical poetry of Greece and Rome. So he's saying, you know, that, yeah, he didn't want to continue his studies, so he starts studying languages with his friend Clerval. And he really likes the writers of these other countries. So anyway, summer passed away in these occupations, and my return to Geneva was fixed for the latter end of autumn. But being delayed by several accidents, winter and snow arrived, the roads were deemed impassable, and my journey was retarded until the ensuing spring. I felt this delay very bitterly, for I longed to see my native town and my beloved friends. My return had only been delayed so long from an unwillingness to leave Clerval in a strange place, before he had become acquainted with any of its inhabitants. The winter, however, was spent cheerfully, and although the spring was uncommonly late, when it came, its beauty compensated for its dilatoriness. Context tells me that is a way of saying its lateness, how long it took to. Anyway, all right. Its beauty compensated for its dilatoriness. So it was a very beautiful spring. So another winter. So a whole year has passed now. So here's the timeline, man. He creates the monster. Henry Clerval shows up. It disappears, and then he goes into this. Like a coma, like a nervous fever, he describes it, for months. Winter and spring go by. They spend a semester studying in the summer and the fall, I'm assuming. And then now, they spent winter cheerfully, and then spring finally came, but it was very late. The month of May had already commenced. So an entire year has gone by. And this monster's just out there somewhere. Like, is that not terrifying? Is that like what's going on? What is going on? Are we just supposed to forget this monster's out there? Like, what's going on? I'm sure we'll get around to it, but I'm freaking out, man. I need to know. I'm dying to know what's happening with the monster. The month of May had already commenced, and I expected the letter daily which was to fix the date of my departure, when Henry proposed a pedestrian tour in the environs of Ingolstadt, that I might bid a personal farewell to the country I had so long inhabited. I acceded with pleasure to this proposition. I was fond of exercise, and Clerval had always been my favorite companion in the rambles of his nature that I had taken among the scenes of my native country. We passed a fortnight in these perambulations. My health and spirits had long been restored, and they gained additional strength from the salubrious air I breathed, the natural incidents of our progress, and the conversation of my friend. Study had before secluded me from the intercourse of my fellow creatures. Okay, there's another word in there that doesn't mean today what it used to mean back then. So it doesn't mean that he's, going around having intercourse with all of his fellow creatures. It just means interaction. His study had secluded him from from all human interaction. He was a shut-in. So it's kind of an awkward word in there, but whatever. We'll go with it. Rendered me unsocial, but Clerval called forth the better feelings of my heart. He again taught me to love the aspect of nature and the cheerful faces of children. Excellent friend, how sincerely did you love me and endeavor to elevate my mind until it was on a level with your own. A selfish pursuit had cramped and narrowed me until your gentleness and affection warmed and opened my senses. I became the same happy creature who, a few years ago, loving and beloved by all, had no sorrow or care, when happy, inanimate nature had the power of bestowing on me the most delightful sensations. A serene sky and verdant fields filled me with ecstasy. The present season was indeed divine. The flowers of spring bloomed in the hedges, while those of summer were already in bud. I was undisturbed by thoughts which during the preceding year had pressed upon me, notwithstanding my endeavors to throw them off, with an invincible burden. Henry rejoiced in my gaiety and sincerely sympathized in my feelings. He exerted himself to amuse me, while he expressed the sensations that filled his soul. The resources of his mind on this occasion were truly astonishing. His conversation was full of imagination, and very often, in imitation of the Persian and Arabic writers, he invented tales of wonderful fancy and passion. At other times he repeated my favorite poems or drew me out into arguments which he supported with great ingenuity. We returned to our college on a Sunday afternoon. The peasants were dancing, and every one we met appeared gay and happy. My own spirits were high, and I bounded along with feelings of unbridled joy and hilarity. So Henry is just this wholesome light in Frankenstein's life that just brings him out of his depression and his misery. And he's feeling good. So Frankenstein is over here living his best life now. He created this terrifying monster and reanimated this dead corpse that he stitched together with pieces of all of these different dead bodies and this 8-foot tall creature. But he's just living his best life now. He says, it don't matter. I don't know what happened to it, but I'm having a good time. It just really strikes me as like so irresponsible. Like he's not even wondering. He's not even in his mind. He's not even thinking like, where did this thing wander? He's probably thinking it wandered off somewhere and died. That's probably what he's thinking. He's probably like, well, it probably just wandered off somewhere and died. But we know better, don't we? We know it's out there. And it's coming. There's going to be some kind of showdown. All right.